Welcome everyone on Zoom. Everyone that's joined us on Zoom, we welcome you to definitely ask questions. And if you've saved questions over the previous two parts, please let's ask them today. This is the third part of three parts of three presentations. And we are finishing up the topic of the purpose of creation. It is part 3, and we are facilitating with Mr. Kambiz Hakim. He has provided a document we all recommend you take a look at. It's on clearwaterbahais.org for download. It's called The Purpose of Creation. As we follow through with this last presentation on the purpose of creation, we welcome you to please bring just any questions that you can think of that may be pertinent for future viewers to watch as they're looking at the recording, probably at this time. With that being said, Mr. Kambiz Hakim, he has put this presentation together. We welcome you to take a look at parts 1 and parts 2. And without many more moments to pause, let's get started. We welcome you. Thank you, Mr. Hakim, for joining us today.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here. And good morning, everyone. As was mentioned, this is the third part of the presentation. Before we begin, if there are any questions from previous sessions, if you have a question, please let's cover those before we begin with the third part. Are there any questions, any comments, anything you would like to discuss?
So I don't see anything on social media.
Okay, then we begin. This third part is about detachment, which is towards the end of the booklet. But to have a little bit better understanding of what detachment is, I'm going back to the first diagram, which is regarding the 4 kinds of love. Just quickly to cover this was the love of God for humanity that He created us. The second love is the love He wants us to have for Him as a creator. And since that is not possible, because God is outside His creation, He can never in His essence enter into the creation. He gives us these pure souls who we call the prophets of God, manifestations of God, to reflect Him in totality within the kingdom of creation. Now, from my understanding and what I believe to be the definition of love of God, people might differ with this. I understand the love of God to be the recognition of the manifestation of God for day and age we live in, and absolute obedience to the laws. And this is the first page of Kitab Aqdas. All right? And Baha'u'llah says that one will not be accepted without the other. Now, the third love is the love that God wants us to have for each other. But the love we are supposed to have for each other has to be through the love of God. You know, in the Hidden Words, Baha'u'llah says, God wants to be loved above all else. Above everything else, He wants to be loved. More than our mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, name it. Above all else. The reason for that, so that we focus our attention on living a holy life in absolute obedience to the laws. That nothing and nobody be able to divert us from this path of the love of God. And in our relationship with each other, always we must abide by the laws that are given, so that whatever the intention of God is for humanity can be achieved. And the most important part of that is love and unity among humanity. All right? So when you look at detachment from this point of view, is that we be detached from everything else except the love of God. That comes first in our life. And in the writings, Baha'u'llah tells us what are acceptable, what things are not acceptable. God has said that I have created everything for the benefit of humanity. All right, everything is for our benefit. But this benefit has to come through an order. The order is the will of God and are the teachings that He manifests to us through His manifestations for day and age we live in. Is there any question on this so far? Is there any clarification on this so far? You see, everything we do has to be through the love of God. And the love of God, again, recognition of the manifestation, obedience to the laws. In every aspect of our life, we have conduct ourselves according to that. In our relationship with God and also in our relationship with each other. And that's the work of this life. God has given us 60, 70, 80, 90 years to be able to do the best we can to achieve this. And of course, achieving this comes through the recognition of manifestation. Okay? All right. Jeremiah, we can go to the page 33. Okay, that's good. Thank you. You see, this is towards the end of the booklet. There are three major barriers between the soul and its creator. And these three are relating to detachment. So we're going to read this. And if you have questions, please raise the questions, or any comments you would like to say, please participate in this. Because this is a very important aspect of our faith. Detachment doesn't mean not having. Detachment is having, but in accordance to the will of God. To do with things according to the will of God. I'm going to start reading this. And then, Jeremiah, you can help me after, please. The following is an excerpt from the Covenant of Baha'u'llah by Mr. Adib Taherzadeh, reprinted here with kind permission from George Ronno Publishers. There are many barriers interposed between man and his creator. In one of his tablets, Baha'u'llah states that there are three barriers between man and God. He exhorts the believers to pass beyond these so that they may attain his presence. The first barrier is attachment to the things of this world. The second is attachment to the rewards of the next world. And the third is attachment to the kingdom of names. These formidable barriers must be removed before man can draw near to God. It is for this purpose that God has sent his messengers throughout the ages. The first barrier, attachment to this physical world. A believer becomes attached to the things of this world when he allows his material, intellectual, and selfish interests to take precedence over the interests of the cause of God. This does not mean that he has to forego his personal interest, but rather to use them in promoting his spiritual pursuits. and not to allow earthly things to come between him and God. Since attachment to this world is a great barrier which prevents man from fulfilling his part in the covenant of God, Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha have exhorted their followers in many of their tablets to become detached from earthly desires, to turn instead to God and obey his commandments. O my servants, could ye but apprehend with what wonders of my magnificence and bounty I have willed to entrust your souls, ye would of a truth rid yourselves of all attachment to all created things, and would gain a true knowledge of your own selves, a knowledge which is the same as the comprehension of my own being. Ye would find yourselves independent of all else but me, and would perceive with your inner and outer eye, and as manifest as a revelation of my effulgent name, the seas of my loving kindness and bounty moving within you. Suffer not your idle fancies, your evil passions, your insincerity and blindness of heart to dim the luster or stain the sanctity of so lofty a station. Ye are even as the bird which soareth with the full force of its mighty wings and with complete and joyous confidence through the immensity of the heavens. Until impelled to satisfy its hunger, it turneth longingly to let's see, where was I? Longingly to the water and clay of the earth below. And having been entrapped in the mesh of its desire, findeth itself impotent to resume its flight to the realms whence it came. Powerless to shake off the burden weighing on its solid wings that bear hereto an inmate of the heavens, is now forced to seek a dwelling place upon the dust. Wherefore, O my servants, defile not your wings with the clay of waywardness and vain desires, and suffer them not to be stained with the dust of envy and hate, that ye may not be hindered from soaring in the heavens of my divine knowledge. Any comment on this so far? Jeremiah, would you like to pick up from there?
This concept of detachment from material things is often misunderstood and is taken to mean renouncing the world. Many people think that the way to detachment is to shut oneself away in a monastery, lead a ascetic life, or live as a mendicant, careless of one's personal affairs and responsibilities. None of these practices conform with the teachings of Baha'u'llah. In his second tablet to Napoleon III, Baha'u'llah, addressing the Christian monks, admonishes them in these words: O concourse of monks, seclude not yourselves in churches and cloisters. Come forth by my leave and occupy yourselves with that which will profit your souls and the souls of men. Thus biddeth you the King of the day of reckoning. Seclude yourselves in the stronghold of my love. This verily is a befitting seclusion, were ye of them that perceive it. He that shutteth himself up in a house is indeed as one dead. It behooveth man to show forth that which will profit all created things, and he that bringeth forth no fruit is fit for fire. Thus counseleth your Lord, and he verily is the Almighty, the All Bounteous. Enter ye into wedlock, that after you someone may fill your place. We have forbidden you perfidious acts, and not that which will demonstrate fidelity. Attachment to this world may be described as anything which becomes a barrier between God and man, depriving the individual from drawing near to his maker. It is clear that the writings of Baha'u'llah that God has created this world for man alone. For instance, in the hidden words, Baha'u'llah declares, O son of dust, all that is in heaven and earth I have ordained for thee, except the human heart. This means that the world and all that is therein is created for man. God wants him to benefit from its wealth, to exploit its resources wisely and in harmony with nature, to work and possess all the good things that he can earn, and to enjoy all the legitimate pleasures that life bestows upon him. But at no time must he allow the things of this world to possess him and rule over his heart and soul. Indeed, in this dispensation, Baha'u'llah has ordained work rendered in the spirit of service to mankind as worship of God. He enjoins upon man the duty of working for the betterment of the world and the building of a new world order on this planet. In one of his tablets, Baha'u'llah has revealed these exalted words. Should a man wish to adorn himself with the ornaments of the earth, to wear its apparels, or partake of its benefits it can bestow, no harm can befall him, if he alloweth nothing whatever to intervene between him and God. For God hath ordained every good thing, whether created in the heavens or in the earth, for such of his servants as truly believe in him. Eat ye, O people, of the good things which God hath allowed you, and deprive not yourselves from his wondrous bounties. Render thanks and praise unto him, and be of them that are truly thankful.
Okay, there was a question regarding how do we know that we have reached detachment, correct? Is that what the question was?
So how do we know if you have achieved detachment in any area of life, and how do you test yourself?
Well, this process of detachment is not only exists in this world, also exists in all the worlds of God. You see, detachment is a process. Absolute detachment, when you read seven valleys, absolute detachment is when you reach the seventh valley. And that is the station of absolute nothingness. What absolute nothingness means there is nothing of you left and everything you possess is of God. You know the example, like you take a piece of metal, iron, you put it into a fire. At the beginning, the metal is hard, is dark, is cold. After being in the fire, we start to acquire the qualities of the fire. It becomes luminous, it becomes soft. You see? As long as you maintain that piece of metal within the fire, it will manifest the qualities of fire. The moment you take it out of the fire, it will go back to its original condition. Now, the only individuals who are absolutely detached from all the worlds are the manifestations of God, and also Abdul-Baha. You see, in all the worlds of God, ownership exists. When you read the writings of Baha'u'llah, you see that in all the worlds of God, ownership exists. And attachment to these things that we own, not only in this world, also in the other worlds, is a challenge and a test for every soul towards its progress towards God. And Baha'u'llah says, whenever we want to test someone, we get them involved with the material things of this kingdom, so they forget God. Now, the other part is that also Baha'u'llah says that every day we bring ourselves to account. If we know the writings, even though we have the challenges at the beginning to abide by it, but as long as we understand it, we read it, we know it, we can bring ourselves to account each day and see where we failed and where we won. We stood firm. And as we examine this process through our everyday life, hopefully we learn how to come all these attachment to the kingdom, to this world or next. So this idea of detachment it's not an easy thing. It's a difficult thing. But it's something that God has given us the ability, the capacity to achieve it. If we didn't have the capacity, he wouldn't ask us to achieve it. You know, it's not easy, but yes, we are able to do it. And this comes about gradually. It needs sincerity of heart, purity of heart. And it requires the knowledge of God. You see, the same way the body must eat every day to stay alive, the soul must eat every day as well. By reading the writings, saying prayers, and meditation on what we are reading, so that we apply it in our daily life. Without trying to apply it in our daily life, otherwise it will be worthless. I hope I have answered your questions. Any further question?
You know, I had a specific question in regards to, because in the previous quotes we've heard about how all of creation was essentially created in order for this relationship between humanity and God, but it's pretty much any creature that has the ability to have that loving relationship with God, right? So, like, is it possible that there are other worlds in existence today that are living the same reality, not necessarily in our same physiological standpoint, but with the same conception? That, because I heard there was a conversation between a couple of scientists, and they were saying that essentially, and what they've been able to glean from looking from studying the stars, is that humanity so far has only really explored a cupful. If you were to quantify space as the entire oceans of the world, humanity has essentially put a 12-ounce glass in the ocean, pulled the water out, and said, this is how much we've explored of the ocean so far. So the reality that there is this process happening in the rest of creation, in the rest of the known universe, is, it seems like it would be, this message would have to be more universal from that standpoint.
Well, let me share with you what my understanding is. From the Baha'i writings from Baha'u'llah, Baha'u'llah says, God has always been and always will be. There was no beginning and there's no end. And his creation has no beginning, no end. So in effect, there is no Big Bang here involved in creation of the universe. Since always has been, always will be. There was no beginning. Okay? But what happens within this universe? Events happens that stars come into existence and stars go out of existence. You see? But overall picture, the universe has always been there, always will be there. Okay? Now in the gleanings, Baha'u'llah mentions every star has its own planets that revolve around it. And the word that was used in gleanings was they have their own creatures. Now remember, this whole universe was created by God. And the same way he wants us to know him and love him, he wants the same thing for all those other creatures in the other planets. It's no difference. They have their own prophets, they have their own Baha'u'llahs, and so on. They have the same purpose. They might not look exactly the way we do, but their essence is the same. You see? And also they have all these infinite worlds to progress in. Now, how do we know? Maybe in the other worlds of God, God will unify all these creations, all these beings in the other worlds of God. We don't know. But the purpose of God always has been to unify. Through unity, he achieves his purpose. That's why anything that's contrary to unity is forbidden. You see? So we are not the only creatures in this universe. There are infinite others. But our purpose right now is within our own earthly life and all the other worlds that we go to, is to progress towards God, to gain spiritual qualities. Because God has purpose for every one of us in his master plan. We all have to fulfill a purpose. Potentially, he's given us all the necessary things we need to achieve it. But he has left it to our own hands through our own free will, through our own effort, to be able to achieve it. That's how we are distinguished. That's how God loves it. God loves different stations. That's why he created it. But to to go higher and higher and progress in the worlds of God, in this world, there's a free will. In other worlds of God, our effort is required. Harder you work, faster you progress. In this world, we have good and bad. In the other worlds of God, there is no bad, it's all good. But how much effort you put into your progress is in your hand. Any other questions? Jeremiah, did this answer you?
It answered a portion of it. I understand from that concept of, I guess I brought it up because we tend to focus on ourselves. We tend to be insular in our thinking and how we perceive reality. So if we perceive ourselves as, in this context, if we literally interpret the words as well, God created all of creation just for us, then we really would have there's a certain amount of, I think, hubris that can easily be developed, thinking that, that it's like, how would we be able to continue to remain humble and to use humility as the standard by which we appreciate not only this world but the rest of creation in regards to that. But the other thing that I've been thinking about recently is there's a lot of advances in science, right? And we're getting to the point, because I've heard you mention this a couple times over the past, is how we're supposed to learn detachment. Well, now we're living longer, so we're going to have longer time frame in which we should learn detachment. But the reality is, do we really need to live longer in order to understand detachment? Or while we materially succeed from a scientific standpoint, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're fulfilling our purpose, right? So if people end up living, I think it's been said that they estimate that people born now are going to live to 150, or so. So, you know, having that more life, so to speak, is that going to help people to learn about spirituality, to understand and appreciate it? Or are these potentially crutches that are going to just delay people from really having to take a look at their spiritual reality in order to actually get to the point where we can become united as one human family?
You see, in this world, when we talk about God has created everything for benefit of man, we are talking about the planet Earth. We're not talking about the outside. Everything that is created in this planet is for the benefit of humanity and the growth of humanity, spiritually as well as scientifically. Because remember, science and religion both comes from the same source, comes from God. And they cannot be contradictory. The contradiction comes from misunderstanding of man, lack of true knowledge. All right? And also in all the other words of God, Baha'u'llah has mentioned, those are the words of discovery, learning, progressing. It's not only in this world. Now, the other thing is that your question was men might live to be 150 years old. When you compare 150 years to eternity, is nothing, becomes non-existence. Abdul Baha calls it the tick of a clock. So God is giving humanity more chance for its spiritual development. All right? Now, thirdly, as Baha'is, we know there are two plans in action. The major plan of God and the minor plan of God. Minor plan of God is that we as Baha'is, we are unified and we teach the Baha'i faith and bring institutions into being and try to bring progress, spiritual progress within humanity. That's the minor plan of God. The major plan of God for the change in humanity is in his own hand. And he takes care of it, he deals with it. We don't have to be concerned about that. But we know from the writings of Baha'u'llah, man has no choice but eventually to abide by the will of God. So whatever is written in our holy books, it's going to happen. But whether it happens sooner or later is in man's hand. Whether man decides to abide by it or through a great deal of suffering to accept it. But it's going to happen. But God has left that choice in humanity's hand. Okay? I mean, God forbid, I do not want to live 150 years. Okay? But again, whether people live to 150 or not, again, is a time for their growth. And as you read into Baha'i writings regarding the future life are going to be way different than what we are living today. It's going to be a world of justice and fairness, equity, kindness, where people will spend most of their time serving each other, okay, associating with each other, and bring advancement in humanity. Sharon.
Oh, yes, look, sorry, I just wanted to take a part of that and just convey that if science is in the greater plan of God, and that's influencing science 150 years, maybe the reality of that has to do with the amount of service. I mean, the only reason why any of us would persevere for 150 years is so that they could actually reach levels of development through this current revelation that have never been seen before, and achieve the things in terms of service and spirituality and service to humanity. And that could be a linked purpose, because a lot of doctors, I've from a medical background, and I found that the attitude in regards to medical application and medical services, especially in my country at the moment, a lot of doctors are getting very upset because science has enabled people to live longer, and they are blaming science because people are getting things like neurological deterioration like Alzheimer's and so on. And it's all about how to keep those people who have been infected, you know, who are the aging population. Well, I just want to put it to people that, you know, none of us want to be here more than 5 minutes when you look at the spiritual worlds. However, if God has given science the ability to extend life, there has to be a purpose for that. I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
You see, science still is in its infancy.
Yes.
Okay. Now, majority of doctors, they believe that everything that takes place is from the brain.
Yes.
From Baha'i writings, we know it's not the brain that does the thinking and understanding or feeling.
Yep.
Brain is a transmitter and a receiver. That's all it does. Is the soul that has the power of cognitive and affective and volition. You see? What happens when something mentally goes wrong? The information from the brain, from the body, cannot be passed to the soul. So the body is not functioning properly. Once they repair that problem in the brain and the connection is achieved, the soul can pass its orders to the body, and body reacts to the order of the soul. That's all it is. Because if the brain was everything, the brain dies with the body. Then there would be nothing left. Then what would be the purpose of the other worlds of God? You see, when we die, we take all the information, all the feelings, everything that we have, all the learnings, we take with us to the other worlds of God. And in all the worlds of God, the soul functions through a form. In this world, we know our body, the way it's made, and how we function. In the other worlds of God, the soul functions through a form that made of the elements of that kingdom. And to go from the lower kingdom to the higher kingdom in the other worlds of God, you have to leave behind that form and acquire a higher form of the next kingdom. In the hidden words, Baha'u'llah calls it, live your life in such a way that death will not visit you again. Now, in the gleanings, Baha'u'llah mentions once the soul enters the Abha kingdom, a form is given to it that is his form for eternity. That means death does not visit you any longer. Now, again, as I mentioned, in all the worlds of God, ownership exists. And that's where attachment and detachment comes into picture. Okay? And every time you pass on from the lower kingdom to the higher kingdom, you got to leave behind all your wealth and start from all over again. Okay? Until you reach Abha kingdom. That's why it is so essential that we do everything in our power to live our life in such a way, according to the writings, that through the grace of God, we go directly from this kingdom to the Abha kingdom and bypass all the in-between, where in Christianity they call it purgatory. Okay? That's what makes this life so important. And the time that is given to us in this life makes it so important. Any comment?
Can I just say that what my purpose in saying that was that if science is discovering we have to live for that length of time, maybe the work that we have to undertake before we have to go to purgatory or the other spheres of development, the requirements may necessitate a longevity that we haven't seen before, given the effusion of this current revelation. So, like, it was just an idea that why would we all of a sudden be able to live till we're 150, and what would be the purpose? And the whole purpose is of exactly what you said, is that maybe we require or use that time that we're in this level of existence to perfect the things for the next level of our eternal life. That was my whole purpose of, and thank you so much, because that kind of answers it in a way. Thank you.
And you know,
Welcome.
an interesting note, both Sharon and Kambiz, is that science has just now discovered the ability to reverse aging in the brain of mice. So that concept of what you were discussing in regards to a lot of these diseases of the brain, they're figuring out a lot of them are attributed directly to the age. So that's the plan. So I was just,
That'd be
it's
great.
neat to think about.
As you said, you see, there is a reason for God allowing us to live longer.
Thank you.
Maybe we cannot understand it, comprehend it properly right now, but in future it will become clear. But there's a reason for it. It's not an accidental. Okay, shall we continue?
Yes, would you like me to continue reading?
Please.
One may be wealthy, yet detached from material things. Man can achieve this if he lives his life in accordance with the teachings of God. In one of his tablets, Baha'u'llah states that the good things of this world and its beautiful products are all the manifestations of the attributes of God. To possess them will not become the cause of attachment to material things, provided the individual does not fix his affections upon them, not allow himself to be possessed by them, because this world and all that is therein are like unto a passing shadow and transitory. To appreciate the true meaning of detachment, let us examine the nature of a human being. We note that the animal nature in man makes him selfish. The instinct for survival drives him to find food, clothing, and shelter for himself. He pursues comfort, wealth, and well-being, and has an insatiable appetite for collecting any beautiful and pleasurable object that comes his way. All these, as well as his emotional, spiritual, and intellectual pursuits, are aimed at benefiting his own self. He is the master of his own life, a pivot around which circle of his material possessions, as well as his intellectual pursuits. One day he finds the cause of God, recognizes its truth, falls in love with it, and then he adds it, like his other possessions, to his collection. He remains the master figure in the center, and all his possessions, including the faith, revolve around him and serve his interests. Such a person is attached to the things of this world, for he allows his own interests to take precedence over the interests of the cause, and his own ego to rule over his spiritual side. He puts his religion on a par with his other pursuits and selfishly expects to benefit from it just as he benefits from his other possessions. On the other hand, genuine detachment from earthly things is achieved when the individual makes the cause of God the pivot of his life, so that all his personal and material possessions may revolve around his faith. In this case, he can benefit from his material possessions without being attached to them. And since the cause of God is the prime motivating influence in his life, he will never act against the teachings of his faith. Every step he takes in his daily activities will be in harmony with the commandments of God. When a person reaches this exalted position, The interest of the faith takes precedence over his personal interest, and when he arises to serve the cause of God, he will be ready to meet the challenge, whatever the cost.
Any comment? Sharon?
Yes, I just wanted to refer to 1919. Abdul Bahar talks about the three kinds of martyrdom, and he speaks very clearly about about this in regards to the state of self-surrender and the most hardest of those martyrdoms. And, you know, I'm not being derogatory in this because giving your life is pretty tough. But the third level of martyrdom he speaks about in 1919 is really about all the things that this previous text has given, but it's the hardest to achieve. And so if we can achieve that, then we're progressing. I just wanted to say that because people don't like to use the term martyrdom, but self-surrender is about that total and absolute self-immolation in terms of self-surrender to that source. Just wanted to put that in there. Thank you.
You know, in the past, the dawn breakers, they gave their life for the progress of the faith. Then Abdul Baha mentioned regarding the West, our challenges are going to be mental. That through the great deal of mental sufferings that we have to, you know, survive and also spiritually grow. Okay, where are we? Okay, from here, I'm going to read them. Becoming detached from the things of this world is often a painful process and involves sacrifice. But when the believer gives up something dear to him for the sake of the cause of God, mysterious forces will be released, which will cause the faith to grow. To offer up one's time to labor for the establishment of the faith in the locality, to give up the comforts of home and to go as pioneer to foreign lands, to offer up one's substance for the promotion of the cause, to be persecuted for one's faith, and even to give one's life at the end. All these sacrifices are meritorious in the sight of God and will undoubtedly bring victory to his cause, provided one's motives are pure and sincere. That is the essential condition of loyalty and steadfastness in the covenant of God, purity of motive. Without it, one's deeds are not acceptable by God. Baha'u'llah testifies to this truth in these words. O children of Adam, holy words and pure and goodly deeds ascend unto the heaven of celestial glory. Strive that your deeds may be cleansed from the dust of self and hypocrisy, and find favor at the court of glory. For ere long the assayers of mankind shall in the holy presence of the adored one accept naught but absolute virtue and deeds of stainless purity. This is the day star of wisdom of divine mystery that has shone above the horizon of divine will. Blessed are they that turn thereunto. Okay, that brings us to second barrier, attachment to the next world. Okay, while we are reading this, remember, well, it will self-explanatory, what is our purity of heart in terms of what we do in this world for the next, preparing ourselves for the next, and also possessing the things of the next world. Jeremiah, would you like to read this?
The second barrier, attachment to the next world. As to the second barrier, We note in the Holy Writings that the purpose of the creation of man is that he may know God. One of the traditions of Islam states that in the beginning God was a hidden treasure, but desired to be discovered and recognized. He created man for this purpose, and now man has found God and turned to him. Returning to the short obligatory prayer which Baha'u'llah revealed for his followers to recite each day, we read, I bear witness, O my God, that thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee. Man, therefore, is created to serve his lordship. Man, therefore, is created to serve his Lord and worship him with a pure heart, hoping to attain his good pleasure. The purpose is not that he receive reward for his actions. Man's deeds are thus praiseworthy in the sight of God when they are performed solely for his love and for no other reason. To this, Baha'u'llah testifies in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, observe my commandments for the love of my beauty. In fact, when a believer turns to the manifestation of God with true love, he cannot help but leave aside his personal interests. His attraction to the manifestation is such that he will offer up everything to his Lord and will seek no benefits for himself. If a man's actions are motivated by the thought that he may reap a reward for himself in the next world, then this is attachment and a barrier between himself and God. To be detached means to do everything for the sake of God and to seek no recompense.
Any comment? Sharon?
The third kind of martyrdom, which is total self-immolation, self-surrender, and for no other reason, for gain or loss or anything. It is a station that we are required for our progress to attain. And perhaps we're going to have a bit more longevity because we're far from that mark at this current stage of our transformation. So it is about absolute nothingness and living in that. Thank you.
Yeah, I recommend, if you haven't read the Seven Valley recently, to review it. It will show all these steps and how to achieve it. Okay, the third barrier, attachment to the kingdom of names. As to the third barrier, there are many references in the writings of Baha'u'llah to the kingdom of names. God in his own essence is exalted above attributes. However, in all his dominions and within each of his words, both spiritual and physical, he reveals the kingdom of his attributes. Every created thing manifests the names and attributes of God. In the spiritual world, these attributes are manifest with such intensity that man will never be able to comprehend them in this life, in the human world. However, these attributes appear within the kingdom of names, and man often becomes attached to these names. In many of his tablets, Baha'u'llah exhorts his followers not to because the bond slaves of the kingdom of names. The well-known Islamic saying, the names come down from heaven, has many meanings. In this world, every one of God's attributes is clad with a name, and every such name reveals the characters of that attribute. For instance, generosity is an attribute of God, and it manifests itself in human beings. However, a person who has this attribute often becomes proud of it and loves to be referred to as a generous when his generosity is acknowledged by other people. He becomes happy and when it is ignored, he is unhappy. This is one form of attachment to the kingdom of names. Although this example concerns the name generosity, the same is true of all the names and attributes of God, manifested within the individual. Usually, man ascribes these attributes to his own person, rather than to God, and employs them to boost his own ego. For instance, a learned man uses the attributes of knowledge to become famous and feels gratified and uplifted when his name is publicized far and wide. Or there is the individual whose heart leaps with feelings of pride when satisfaction, when he hears his name mentioned and finds himself admired. These are examples of attachment to the kingdom of names. Human society at present exerts a pernicious influence upon the soul of man. Instead of allowing him to live a life of service and sacrifice, it is highly competitive and teaches him to pride himself on his accomplishments. From early childhood, he is trained to develop his ego and to seek to exalt himself above others, in the ultimate aim of achieving self-importance, success, and power. The revelation of Baha'u'llah aims to reverse this process. The soul of man needs to be adorned with the virtues of humility and self-effacement, so that it may become detached from the kingdom of names. Abdul-Baha, the true exemplar of the teachings of Baha'u'llah, demonstrated this form of detachment by his actions. He never in the course of his life wished to exalt his name. Nor did he seek publicity for himself. For instance, he had an immense dislike of being photographed. He said to have a picture of oneself is to emphasize the personality. During the first few days of his visit to London, he refused to be photographed. However, as a result of much pressure by the newspaper reporters and persistent pleas by the friends to be allowed to take his photograph, Abdul-Baha acquiesced in order to make them happy. The exalted titles conferred upon him by Baha'u'llah are indicative of Abdul-Baha's lofty station. Yet Abdul-Baha never applied them to himself. Instead, after ascension of Baha'u'llah, he took the title of Abdul-Baha, servant of Baha, and urged the believers to call him only by this name. True servitude at the threshold of Baha'u'llah was all he prized. These are some of his words as he described his utter self-effacement and reality of his station. My name is Abdul-Baha. My qualification is Abdul-Baha. My reality is Abdul-Baha. My praise is Abdul-Baha. Thraldom to the blessed perfection is my glorious and refulgent diadem, and servitude to all the human race, my perpetual religion. No name, no title, no mention, no commendation have I, nor ever have, except Abdul-Baha. This is my longing, this is my greatest yearning, this is my eternal life, this is my everlasting glory. Any comments so far? Jeremiah, would you pick up from there, please?
One of the distinguishing features of Baha'u'llah's embryonic world order is that it does not harbor egotistical personalities. Baha'u'llah has conferred authority on its institutions, whether local, national, or international, but the individuals who are privileged to serve on them are devoid of any authority. Unlike men who wield power in the world today and seek to acquire fame and popularity, members of Baha'i institutions cannot but manifest humility and self-effacement if they are to remain faithful to Baha'u'llah. Those who do not succeed through immaturity or lack of faith in living up to these standards are indeed attached to the kingdom of names and become deprived of the bounties of God in this age. To sever oneself from the kingdom of names may prove to be the most difficult task for a Baha'i, and the struggle may indeed last a lifetime. If a man can only realize that his virtues are not intrinsically his own, but rather are manifestations of the attributes of God, then he is freed from the kingdom of names and becomes truly humble. Such a man will bestow divine perfections upon the world of humanity. This is the loftiest station that God has destined for man. To the extent that a believer succeeds in severing himself from these three forms of attachment, will he be fulfilling his part in the covenant of God. To achieve this exalted goal, man needs to recognize the station of Baha'u'llah as the manifestation of God for this age, and then observe his commandments with clear vision, mature reflection, and prayerful attitude. This can be achieved through deepening one's knowledge of the faith and in serving his cause. It is then that the heart will become the recipient of the knowledge of God and will attain certitude in its faith. It is then that obedience to the teachings of the faith becomes wholehearted as the individual grasps the significance of God's commandments and comes to understand their wisdom, their excellence, and their necessity. It is then that his thoughts, his vision, his aspirations, his words, and his deeds will all be in harmony with the covenant of God. And it is then that his soul will acquire spiritual qualities and virtues. This is the ultimate outcome of obedience to the covenant, which will enable the soul to progress in the spiritual worlds of God.
Well, that brings us to the end of the booklet. Any comment, any statements, any questions?
Yes, I have one. Hello, hello.
Hello.
So there's a quote. This is from Gleanings from the Ranks of Baha'u'llah, page 149. I prefer to say paragraphs, but I don't have that. It says, every good thing is of God, and every evil thing is from yourselves. Will ye not comprehend? This same truth hath been revealed in all the scriptures, if ye be of them that understand. Every act ye meditate is as clear to him as is that act when already accomplished. There is none other God besides him. His is all creation and its empire. So there's this saying that many people have who question their belief in God, God's existence, and our place in the universe. And particularly questioning whether God exists. Some may say, how can God allow bad deeds to be performed if he exists? How can God allow for bad things to happen in this world to people who are innocent, who cannot defend themselves, be they too young or too old or too infirm in health, so on and so forth? There's this question that people ask, and then there's this conception of course, there being heaven and God, and hell and the devil, Satan. These conceptions, and it's interesting because the redefining nature of the Baha'i teachings, asking us to remember the teachings that were brought before, in one sense, to clarify what they are and to bring more clarification that may have not been provided before. This idea, I'm going to repeat the quote: every good thing is of God, and every evil thing is from yourselves. Will ye not comprehend? This same truth hath been revealed in all scriptures, if ye be of them that understand. Every act ye meditate is as clear to him as is that act when already accomplished. There is none other God besides him. His is all creation and its empire. Page 149 of Gleanings. So
God has created good and bad in this world. so that human beings, through their own effort, distinguish themselves. You see? He gives you the path, the right path to travel for your spiritual development. At the same time, if there was no bad, how can a human being distinguish himself? And all those souls who suffer in this world because of injustice are rewarded in the next world. They made up for it. You see? God, through his justice, doesn't allow things to go by. Now, one thing that is important, Baha'u'llah in his writings says that the concourse on high, they know us better than we know ourselves. To them, the past, present, future is all one. You see, you know, you have a knowledge that today when the sun goes down, it's going to rise again tomorrow, correct? You know that. But that knowledge that you have doesn't make the event to happen. The souls in the highest paradise, they're aware of every one of us, our deeds and actions. But they're allowed in us, through our own effort, to distinguish ourselves spiritually, to distinguish ourselves where we belong in the next life. You know, the same way in this world, you have to trust somebody to put them in a position of responsibility. It's the same goes in the next world. God has to trust you to know you're capable of doing it, to put you in a station that you can serve best. In the other worlds of God, the lower kingdoms serve the higher kingdoms. The higher kingdoms, they take care of the lower kingdoms with absolute humility. There is no ego, there's none of that material things in the other world. Again, referring to the highest level from the seventh valley, Baha'u'llah says absolute nothingness. All they can do reflect is the will of God. Nothing else, nothing of their own. And also in the fourth valley, in the four valleys, Baha'u'llah says, these souls, they carry the scepter of kingship. What they say, it will be. And then he qualifies it, says, what I say, it is. You see? So in this life, there has to be light and darkness, good and bad. So one can distinguish oneself.
Well, it seems as well that we are ourselves the cause of bad more so than God, as what I understood from the quote. So God allows for it, but we ourselves are the cause.
Well, out of every 10 difficulties that happens to us, 9 of it is caused by ourselves. Once we live by the will of God and obey the ordinances of God, we can bypass those tests and trials, those hardships. Any other comment?
Thank you for that. There's one other piece, and that is it's not guaranteed if you don't follow the laws that something bad will happen, but it is very likely that something bad will happen when you're in an event that the law applies to, correct?
Well, you know, there's a law of gravity. Okay? It's God's creation. So if somebody goes on top of a roof and decide to disobey that law and jumps, they're going to get hurt. Can you say God did that to him? No, whenever you go against the laws of God, you get hurt. That's the principle of universe, existence. Anytime you go against any laws of God, you disobey, they're going to be pain and sorrows to pay.
Thank you for that clarification. We appreciate it that you took the time, Kambiz, to be here with us for these 3 sessions to go
Thank
through
you.
the beautiful pamphlet you had created. The 40 pages of this is available. All of it is available on clearwaterbahais.org. You can search for it, The Purpose of Creation. It's a PDF that you'd be downloading. There's the subject of what will we do going forward. This is the last of the series. If the time comes, we want to go over something similar to this again, we are more than happy to do so. However, if you're watching this recording on YouTube or on Facebook, we welcome you to share and to follow up with questions you may have that we didn't address in these 3 sessions in the 3 YouTube or Facebook videos you're watching. This being part 3, the 3rd. So that is one point, is that there's, again, the recordings available. It is June 11, 2023 that we're recording this. And we welcome you to visit clearwaterbahais.org to find other videos such as these that are either recorded or going to be on Zoom soon. And we are doing the sessions that we record these videos on Sundays at 11 a.m. local time. We are welcome to, of course, register for the sessions or, of course, watch the recordings, all of which are available on the various platforms. So that being said, we thank you all who have joined and participated in providing your questions, your thoughts, ideas, and quotes, perhaps. All this has been very, not just beautiful to listen to, but useful for those who have been here and those who will be listening. That being said, again, Mr. Kambiz Hakim, we appreciate your time here. Are there any closing thoughts you'd like to address prior to closing out today?
No, I don't have any other thoughts. Just if in future any questions anybody has, I'd be glad to answer them.
Splendid. So you all heard it. We welcome you to please send us your questions. And Kambiz and his time, when he's able to, he'll get back to you. We thank you all, and we wish you a beautiful afternoon on this beautiful Sunday. And for those of you joining, we have our Race Amity conference at the Baha'i Center in Clearwater. All are welcome to join. It'll be today at 1 p.m. local time. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye now.